Andrew, take it away.
Try mic. Ooh, that's live. No, I got it. Okay, so I only have to whisper. That's really good. So, good morning. Yeah.
We also have several people out rehearsing, either outside or in the other rooms, but that's maybe why it's a little scant in here. So go ahead, Andrew.
No problem. Thank you. So, I appreciate the introduction. I'm really glad to be here. My name is Andrew Adams. I live in Vermont. And I was invited by Gary Gelati initially, who I met at the New Hampshire Highland Games in Loon Mountain, Lincoln, New Hampshire, this past September. And I want to thank you, Gary, for coming up and meeting you. It was great. So after I met Gary, I went through and joined the USARD and went through and watched a bunch of videos, which was really great because I had never heard of the association before. And one of the things I noticed was that you have in the past had some pipe band drummers, which was really cool. You had John Quigg and Adrian Mordaunt in the past, and I watched both of their lectures or performances, and they did a really great job of talking about the stylistic differences in how we, in pipe bands, perform and play on our snare drums, and how that is different than fife and drum corps, rope tension drummers play, and some of the stylistic differences between DCI. And so I didn't want to echo that. You know, they already did that. And so I figured I'm going to spend some time talking about what makes our drums different and what makes them the same, right? If you look at this bass drum here, it looks nearly identical to a DCI style American marching band bass drum, but it sounds very different and it's played very different. Fife and drum corps have rope tension bass drums, and it's still a bass drum, right? A big wooden hoop with heads on the side that you play like this, but the sound and how we play it is very different. So I wanted to make sure to really go through what makes what we play in terms of instrumentation a little different than what people see. And if you've ever seen a pipe band perform in a parade, you may have noticed they have another drum that you don't see in either DCI corps or in fife and drum corps, and that we call them tenor drums. And so they look very similar to a snare drum, right? It's got a shell that you play on top, but there's no snares on it. It would be similar to like if you took a rope tension drum and took the snares off, right? There's going to be no response at all, and I'll play them in just a second. And we use them in a way that's slightly different than any other style of drumming that we have here. We use our tenor drums kind of like DCI corps use their bass drums. So DCI corps, right, you've got different size basses tuned to different notes. We do the same thing with our tenor drums. So there's different sizes and depths, and we tune them to different notes to help accentuate the melodic line that the bagpipers are playing. But even the difference between the bass drums in DCI and the tenor drums in pipe band, we go for a much more resonant note, right? And so let me put this on here so you can get an idea what I'm talking about. Sorry. So first thing that's different is you'll notice that the mallets that we play are fuzzy, right? They're not like bass drum mallets for fife and drum corps, right? Solid wood. So it's a plastic shaft with a bit of foam on the end, which is covered in some just a fluffy material just to basically hold it in. And the sound that you get will be, I'll step up front here, will be more of a resonant note. Maybe I won't step forward, right? And we tune them. Really sorry about that. So they're tuned to different notes. you can hear that there's a lot more of a resonance sound to the drum. That sounds really cool through the mic. Now, if you've seen bands performing in parade or competition, you'll notice that the tenor drummers, I've got strings attached, and they are a visual representation to the music as well. So while they might be playing, they're also using their mallets in a flourishing manner to give a visual representation to what we're playing. So it'll be a combination of both. So it might be like, and so when the music is swelling, you can get motions that are up high, and then the music might come down low, and so it's just a visual representation of what we're playing. Bagpipes have one key. It's in the key of B flat. You can, unlike a fife or in a DCI core like a trumpet or whatever, you only get 9 notes. That's it. Bagpipe has 9 notes and no more. I don't know why it's happening, because I'm not really in front of unless that's going into those. That might happen. But the bagpipes have 9 notes. That's it. You know, that's all there are, 9 notes. So, and they're in the key of B flat. So we tune our tenor drums in that key. So for example, if there was a band that had 3 tenor drums, we would tune them to B flat, F, and E flat on a scale. So you'll get a nice major chord. So if they're played together, it'll sound good in relation to the bagpipes that are being played. And so we can help accentuate the melodic line of what they're doing. The bass drum, I'm actually going to move my microphone here for a second so I can put this bass drum on. The bass drum as well has a different function in the band. It is, we would call it the heartbeat of the band, but again, it's going to be a lot more resonant than bass drums that you will see in fife and drum corps. And it's also a totally different style, right? We're not coming straight in because we want to hear more of a warm tone from the drum. And so when it's played, it's typically played with a sweeping motion, so we're just glancing the head. So it's, again, very different in how we use the drum, even though the drum will look the same as a DCI core, and it's still a bass drum like in a fife and drum corps, but just different in terms of how we use it. There are some differences between our snare drums and the drums used in other styles and other genres. It will look right now, unless you're really experienced, it looks exactly the same as this. So this drum is manufactured by Pearl, and it looks exactly the same as a Pearl snare drum used in a DCI core. Just from the outside looking at it, it's going to look exactly the same. But there are some things that make this drum a little bit different from a DCI drum. And obviously, it's very different from a rope tension drum. I don't think we need to get into the differences there. You guys can see that, and I'm sure you know that. But what makes this drum different from a typical American marching drum is our snares on the bottom are made of wire. Most DCI cores that I've seen, they're made of gut, right? And we also have a set not just on the bottom, but there's a set inside as well on the top head. So there's actually 2 sets of snares. There's an external on the bottom, and there's a set of snares inside that is internal sitting on the top head. And we find that it allows us to get a much crisper sound to the drum and more of a crack because you've got both sets of snares that are being activated when you hit the drum. The other difference is that we have no way to quickly turn off our snares, right? In a DCI core, there's usually a lever on the side that you can flip down, and it turns those snares off, right? It lowers them off the bottom head. Well, we don't have that in our drum. My snares are always on unless I take my drum key and turn a knob to lower them. But I've got to do it on both because I've got two. So we don't have that ability to do it all. They are just always on. And again, we find that it gives us a little bit more of a brighter, crisper sound. Which gives us that volume that we need in pipe bands. Because if anybody has ever seen a pipe band, raise your hand if you've ever seen a pipe band live perform, okay? So you guys should know that bagpipes have two volumes. Really, really loud and off. That's it, right? In a trumpet, you can blow lighter and you'll get a quieter volume, right? You don't have that in bagpipes. They have to be loud. You have to push enough air through the bag to activate the reeds to get them to vibrate, which makes the sound that you hear. And if you don't put enough air volume through the bagpipes, the reed will not vibrate and there will be no sound. So bagpipes are either really loud or off. And that's one of the reasons why we have the drum that we play today. A little history on our pipe band drums. You know, back in the day, you know, bagpipes have been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. And the British military, when they would have a pipe band form back in the 1800s, they would play the exact same drums that are played in fife and drum corps today. Rope tension drum, no difference whatsoever. And then, you know, materials started changing, and they started making their shells a little differently. They started to get away from the rope tension system and using a wooden shell with hardware bolted into the side, right? This isn't necessarily anything that's new, but we in pipe band world, the pitch of the bagpipe kept getting higher and higher. So when I tell you that bagpipes are in the key of B flat, anyone who is a true musician that plays in a DCI corps, if they played a B flat on their trumpet, it would actually be lower than the B flat on the bagpipe, because our pitch is constantly being raised. And so the drummers in the drum corps started to do, we wanted a higher pitch as well. So we started cranking our heads to get a higher pitch. The plastic heads that were used at the time would start to break. And so they came out with the Kevlar heads that are used today in DCI corps and in pipe bands. So now we found with hardware built into the side, we can crank the Kevlar head, and the Kevlar's not going to break. But what started happening? The wood shell started to buckle because there's so much tension. So they came out with this free-floating head system that DCI corps use today. And so that's where this, you know, one of the reasons why this drum looks the way it is, both in DCI and in pipe bands as well. So, you know, that's kind of just a little brief overview on the drums that we use. And these are the only three drums in pipe bands, right? Snare drum, bass drum, and then tenor drums, which are tuned and are not just played melodically, but have a visual representation to what we're doing as well. So it gives you an idea on the drums that we play. And I wanted to talk a little bit about I've got a couple of friends here. We're going to play a bit of a fanfare for you. And I wanted to just give a brief explanation on what it is we're going to play and where it came from. And this name is someone you might recognize, and his name is Alex Duthert. Okay? Alex Duthert was a drummer, started drumming in the 40s, taught initially by his dad in Scotland, and he became what we in the pipe band world is known as the grandfather of all pipe band drumming, because anyone who's in the pipe band world today, drumming-wise, can trace their lineage, literally, back to Alex Duthert in some way. So for me, I study with a snare drummer in Vancouver, British Columbia. He learned from a guy, Jim Bell, in Scotland, who learned from Alec Duther. And everybody who's anybody pretty much today can do that with their lineage. And Alec Duther won the World Solo Drumming Championship for pipe band 13 years in a row, I believe. And he stopped competing because, as I've been told, and this happened long before my day, but as I've been told, he wanted to allow someone else to have a chance, which I find pretty funny. He took some time off from pipe bands after a while. He took about 2 or 3 years off. He joined a jazz dance band, big band, playing drum set. And he went and spent a lot of time in Switzerland with a gentleman by the name of Dr. Fritz Berger. And it was here that he started to realize that there's more to drumming than what he knows, right? He knows pipe band, and there's this whole other world of Basel Swiss drumming. And he said, I'm going to take that back to pipe bands because it's really cool. And he spent some time with the big bands, and some of the stuff that the big bands were doing, he said, you know what, this is another style of music that has something that's really cool. And for him, the thing that he brought back at that immediate time, what we in the pipe band world call chips, or unisons, or seconds. And essentially, before he came up with this idea, all the drummers in the pipe band would play all the time, right? The pipers would strike up, and all 5, 6, 7 snare drummers, whatever, would play all the time. And he went to big band, and he thought it was really cool that the trumpets wouldn't play all the time. The whole band would be going along, and the trumpets would just give out some hits. He thought that was awesome. And he said, why can't we do that in the pipe band world, in the drum corps, right? The volume on the bagpipes is always loud, so why don't we cut out for some bits? And so now, if you watch a competitive pipe band, there will be one snare drummer that will play all the time, and all the other snare drummers will come in and play, and they'll sit out for a bit, and they'll come in and play some more accents, and they'll step out, not literally step out, but they'll stop playing. And it was Alex Duthert that did that, brought that from big bands. And the reason I tell this story is I love music, and I think that we as musicians need to continue to keep an open mind, because Alec went to Switzerland and brought back some of his Swiss drumming to us in pipe bands. He went to jazz big bands and brought some of that playing hits back to pipe bands. And I think that it's a great opportunity for us to all learn from each other, which I think is pretty awesome. In the late 60s, he joined a pipe band called the Invergordon Distillery Pipe Band. It was a pipe band sponsored by a Scotch whiskey company. I wish we could get those these days. And they basically said, we want a pipe band to promote our alcohol. And we want to put together a pipe band of the best players around. And so they came to him, and he called a bunch of his friends from pipe band days, and they formed this drum corps for the Invergordon Distillery pipe band. And at that point, he was so appreciative of the distillery for forming this new band that he wrote a drum salute for basically the CEO of the company. His name was Max Rayne, R-A-Y-N-E. And he wrote this drum salute for him. Every year, if you win the world, at that time, if you won the World Pipe Band Championships, the next year, the winning drum corps would be required to perform a drum salute or a drum fanfare at the World Championships. And so he wrote this drum salute in the late 60s. I think 66 is the first time that I've seen it show up. And it has changed a bit. He wrote it, they'd play it, and then a couple years later, he'd take some stuff out and he'd put some stuff in. But the reason I wanted to play this for you guys tonight, or this morning, sorry, not tonight, is twofold. One, it's the most well-known drum salute in pipe bands ever. And it was written back, 50 plus years now, and is still played to this day every year at concerts around the world. And the other reason I wanted to play it is there's a bit at the end that I bet all of you fife and drum corps drummers are going to recognize, because it's a bit that he, I don't want to say stole, he borrowed from the Swiss drumming style that he played when he went to Switzerland. So we've got just a few minutes left, so I'm going to call up a couple of friends that are here to play with me. Jameson Grout is a snare drummer and lives in Connecticut and plays with the Worcester Kilty Pipe Band from Worcester, Massachusetts. one thing I will tell you about pipe band drummers is we are pretty insane when it comes to playing in pipe bands. Jameson, how long of a drive is it for you to practice? What's that? An hour and 10 minutes. I've driven 4 hours every week to get to band practice before and have practiced for 2 hours, and then I drove 4 hours home. That sort of stuff is common. I know a band in Vermont that has players that live in, I'm not kidding, Indiana, and they fly in for band practice. So we are a pretty insane group of people. So Jameson Grout here on my right lives in Connecticut and plays with the Worcester Kilty Pipe Band. On my left, Tamara McClendon, who is associated with, as you see on her bass drum, the Scotia Glenville Pipe Band, which used to be a all-juvenile band from Albany, New York. Clearly, she's not a juvenile. They now have opened the band up to adults. It's also the band that I play in as well. I'm a member of the Scotia Glenville Pipe Band, who won the Juvenile World Championships in 2012, and we're going back this year to compete in the World Championships again. Hopefully we will do just as well. And Jameson will be at the World Championships playing with another band as well from Connecticut, the Stone of Destiny Pipe Band. So we're going to perform the Salute to Max Rain, and we hope you enjoy. I'm actually going to take this mic off, because otherwise it'll be really loud. There we go. So, salute to Max Rain. We just got a couple of minutes. If anyone has any questions, I'm certainly more than happy to answer any. Again, my name is Andrew. I live in Vermont. If you're interested in pipe band drumming lessons, hit me up. But any questions? Yes?
You said that over 100 years ago, the drum was primarily a rope drum, but at some point in time, it changed. When did it change? When did they add the top snares? I know when they probably added the Kevlar, but did the top snares come with the Kevlar or before?
No, they didn't. And I know because I have some vintage drums so the Kevlar heads came about in the 80s, I believe, but I have drums that are pre-80s that have plastic heads on them that still had snares on the top. In fact, I have a drum from the 60s that had snares on the top. I can't go earlier than that I'm not positive, but I know that in the 60s they had both an internal and an external snare.
So the piece you just performed, I think it was written in 1960s?
Yep.
So would that have had snares on it for that piece?
On the top snares, yeah, it would have. Yep, they would have been played on, there's a company in England at the time called Rose Morris that made pipe band drums and probably would have been written and performed on Rose Morris drums. It eventually became the Klansman drum, which was eventually bought by Premier, who then turned it into the Premier Royal Scot drum, which then they came up with a new line, and eventually this is the new Premier drum that they make today, but that was the precursor, would have been the Rose Morris drums, yes?
When they added the top snares, did it change the composition of vocabulary a lot? Like did they start adding more presses and more buzzes, or was that already happening before?
I'm not sure because it's before my time, certainly. But the style of drumming certainly has changed. Obviously, you'll notice other than that end section where we played essentially 3 camps, right? Most all of our rolls are closed rolls, buzz rolls. Obviously, you can't do that on a rope tension drum to the same degree, so that's why all the rolls are open for the most part. So obviously, the style of the drumming changed from the 60s to the 80s to now. So I don't know if that answers your question completely, but anyone else? The World Pipe Band Championships are every year in Glasgow, Scotland, on Glasgow Green. And there are typically a handful of US bands that attend every year. It's a very expensive endeavor to do. I mean, even if you have a quote-unquote small pipe band, you're still going to be going over with approximately 20 players. So that's quite an expense to go over. I think this year, just in New England alone, there are, I think, 5 US pipe bands from New England going to the World Championships this year. So it'll be a big year for New England US pipe bands. So anyone else have any questions? Yes?
Can you name those 5 bands?
Sure. The Scotia Glenville Pipe Band from Albany, New York, which I guess technically isn't New England because it's New York, but I'm going to count them anyway. So the Scotia Glenville Pipe Band is going. The Stuart Highlanders from Wilmington, Massachusetts. They're the US's only grade 1 band right now, I believe. The Stone of Destiny Pipe Band from Enfield, Connecticut. The Worcester Kilty Pipe Band from Worcester, Massachusetts. And there's one more that there's another, but I can't think of it right now. Yeah, I'm not sure. I believe there's another, but I'm not positive. Yes?
I know pipe bands. Andante
Yep.
is another.
Yep, there were actually, my Andante snare drum is actually over there in the corner. There are 3 major manufacturers of snare drums, or of pipe band drums. Andante, which I have over there, is the blue drum that matches this bass drum. Pearl, which is the one that I played here, and Premier, which is this drum here. But yes, Andante is another manufacturer from Northern Ireland. Yep. Yes?
Whaley Royce, still around?
Don't know the name, I'm sorry.
Okay. I just wanted to mention, you mentioned the variety of sound and the tonality. And I'm thinking 20 years ago, I was in Sacramento, California, and sat in with the Ben Alley pipe band, Shrine Band.
Okay, yep.
And they used, like you said, the lead and answer
Yes.
method, which created a big change in the volume and the sound since the pipes were constant.
Exactly.
And the only drum that I had was one of my old rope drums, skinheads, no rags, and all. So we're playing along for the first time going down the street, and as soon as I came in to answer with the 2 other side drummers, heard that undertone.
Yeah,
And
that's,
I just applaud it.
yes, that was great.
It gave so much more body.
I personally love,
Instead of the muffle.
I love the sound of rope tension drums with pipe bands, with bagpipes. I think it's great. So I want to thank you all for,
By the way,
yes,
coming up in a couple of weekends at West Point.
the West Point Tattoo. Yep.
And you'll hear the 42nd Raw Highlanders from Lafayette, Indiana.
There are a number of pipe bands that will be
Which
there.
is an offshoot of the Tippecanoe Ancients, also in Lafayette, and they use all rope drums.
Yeah, yeah, there are a number of pipe bands that will be there, so that's great. So I want to thank the USARD for having me here, and Bill, I want to thank you too. Thank you. So, thank you. Have a wonderful day, guys.